It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, today we're going to jump on that interactive board. I want to go through Ricoh's FY 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going through this presentation today, and I just want to say this right off the bat. Ricoh just doesn't have the ability to produce enough operating profit, in my mind, for them to maintain a continuous relevance. I wanted to pause so y'all think about it, because I know you saw the headline. Ricoh, 97% increase in operating profit. So now you're thinking, well, Ray, that's totally the opposite of everything we just read about Ricoh's year-end FY 2022. The reality of it is, ladies and gentlemen, our industry's got to start paying attention to these presentations these OEMs put out. Relying on the media, relying on the analysts to do it, isn't going to get you what you need to know. You really got to start looking at this stuff, and I believe that we need to start asking these OEMs a whole lot more questions. And today I'm going to ask Ricoh some questions. I'm going to share my thoughts regarding their financials, because I truly believe that Ricoh is heading toward a disaster because they have an inability to be consistent with their operating profit. And now they're getting too obsessed with returning too much money to their shareholders. Now, if you're an investor, you're thinking, well, we want them to share our money with the shareholders. If you're a long-term investor, you should be thinking, maybe Ricoh needs to use that money so they can invest in a different future, a future when print is completely irrelevant. And everybody wants to do that. Ricoh talks about doing that. We hear dealers talk about doing that. We hear some of these mega roll-ups talk about doing that. But if you're not willing to make those investments to grow your business organically into the transition deliverable, you're going to be in trouble. And you notice I said to grow your business organically. Those of you that are running around buying up all this growth and not paying attention to your profit are heading down a road to nowhere. And Ricoh, let's all be honest. You bought Mindshift in 2014. That was 9 years ago. And then you did a big impairment charge against it. You bought Icon. You did a big impairment charge against it. Now you're running around Europe buying up IT services companies, buying up software companies. And at the end of the day, you don't share any of the profitability of any of those assets you're buying up. And it looks to me like you're heading to the day where you're going to do another big impairment. So let's jump on the board, and I want to share my thoughts. The first thing I read was this: operating profit below full year forecast, but soared 97%. What a stupid sentence that is. That tells you two things, okay? It tells you had a really bad year, or you're really, really crappy at forecasting. So you didn't hit your forecast, but you grew your operating profit by 97%. That's just, you see how the logic in that doesn't make any sense to get excited about. The reality of it is you did grow your profit 97% because you had a really bad year the year before. And I think if you focused on the fact that you had a really, really bad year before and that 97% operating profit growth was put into perspective, I don't think the investment community would be very excited about it. So now today, I want to put it in perspective. Let's look at the top line revenue, $15.8 billion. They had an operating profit of $584 million. Yes, in fact, that's 3.7% for FY 2022, an increase of 97%, but it only increased the percentage against revenue of 1.4. So we went from 2.3% of revenue and operating profit to 3.7% of revenue and operating profit, but we had a 97% increase. That's not that good. I mean, what's so exciting about that? You celebrating the really bad 2021? Because you're not really celebrating a fantastic 2022 at 3.7% for the whole year. Ricoh and Konica and Ricoh are the worst at this, but you got to get those operating profits up to 7%, 8%, 6%, 5.5%, 3% and 4%. It's not going to do it. It just, to me, it means you don't have enough discipline when you're out in the marketplace selling things to make sure you got enough profit on it, even though you're going into all these other services. And now I want to share with you my real concern about the operating profit. You show this in your financial presentation. These are all the business categories. These are the operating profits, and here's what I came up with, okay? And folks, this isn't anything to get excited about. Forget about the 3.7% operating profit. Ricoh Digital Services, $12.2 billion of that $15.8 billion worth of revenue. So $12.2 billion of the revenue had a $209 million operating profit, 1.6%. Ricoh Digital Products, $3.2 billion of the revenue, had a $233.4 million operating profit, 0.75%, less than 1%. Ricoh Graphic Communications, $1.7 billion in revenue, $107.5 million, 0.75% operating profit, less than 1%. Ricoh Industrial Solutions, $862.6 million top line revenue, $23 million operating profit, 0.25%. A quarter of 1% operating profit. This isn't exciting. This is your business. You know, doing some financial accounting strategies to increase the operating profit is not reality. Against customers buying products and services from you with enough profitability to give you operating profit. When $12.2 billion of your revenue is coming in at 1.6%. $3.2 billion is coming in at 0.75%, $1.7 billion is coming in at 0.75%, and $826.6 million is coming in at 0.25%. Ricoh. You see why you got to know the whole story? You see why you got to dig into these numbers, folks? Because numbers don't lie, they're unemotional. Let's look at this digital services business, this $12.2 billion worth of the $15.8 billion in revenue. We got office print at $6.5 billion of that, and office services at $5 billion. You know what really drives me crazy? It drives me crazy with Ricoh. It drives me crazy with Konica, with Xerox, all the OEMs. They talk about these other services they do, but they never share with you the profitability. Ricoh shares the numbers, the revenue numbers of the office services categories. They broke all the categories down, but they don't share with you the operating profit. So what are you supposed to think? The services business is not profitable? Otherwise, wouldn't they be sharing it? Why do they got to take the office services business and the office print business, put the numbers together from an operating profit, but separate the numbers from a revenue? In the office services business, IT infrastructure, hardware and software is $1.8 billion of the $5 billion in revenue. IT services, including maintenance and outsourcing, $1.069 billion. Applications, business-specific apps and in-house apps, $924.1 million. Business process services, $890.7 million. Others, $318.2 million. So the $5 billion worth of office services is all broken out, except for the operating profit. Why is that? I'm telling you right now, whether it's Ricoh, Konica, or any of you, if you all would put the operating profit on these categories, you would start having the pure pressure to produce operating profit, number one, and then you would probably realize that some of this stuff you shouldn't even be doing. But lumping it all together and hoping that you could suck the money out of the print business until you're all ready to retire isn't going to work much longer. Because the print business is definitely going to hit the wall, and your investors want to know this. Tell us what the operating profit is on all this other stuff you're doing. I just don't get why they don't do it. I'll tell you why they don't do it, because it's probably not a big number. Here's the breakout geographically of the $5 billion in office services. Europe, $1.5 billion. Americas, $1.022 billion. $2.5 billion is outside of Europe and Americas. Most of that's in Japan. So we got $1.5 billion in office services in Europe. Most of that number's coming out of they're out there buying all these companies up. We've read all the press releases. They did say that they had a 22% organic growth in Europe. I did the math on that. It's about $330,000 if that number's correct. But what's the operating profit? Did you grow organically $330,000 because you gave it all away with no money? Because that wouldn't be good. What's the operating profit in Americas? What's the operating profit in Europe in general? What's the operating profit in Japan? Wouldn't it be nice if your investors could know that? The fact that they're not asking you this is mind-boggling to me. This sheet's a little scary. And I want to talk about free cash flow. The third quarter of 2022, remember that episode? The free cash flow was really in the toilet. It balanced out for the year, but they're $500 million in negative free cash flow for FY 2022. And folks, here's the other thing I looked at. You know, if you look at the consolidated statement of cash flows, and this goes back to 2019, and the light blue is net cash provided from operating activities. The dark blue is net cash used for investing purposes. and the gold line is the free cash flow. Well, you can see the free cash flow is going down, okay? There's zero. This is not good. We start to come up, we're going down. And folks, there's another thing I want to share with you. $2.7 billion in debt. At the end of March, so March of 2022, okay, which the fiscal year for 2021 ended March of 2022, Ricohs increased their debt since March of 2022 by $946.6 million. That's a 35% increase. So this fiscal year, they've increased their debt by 35%. At the same time, their free cash flow is going the wrong way. At the same time, the cost of debt is grown exponentially in the last year. And so the reality of it is, I don't believe Ricoh has enough discipline to produce enough operating profit to get him through these hiccups. And running around buying stuff, that day is going to come to an end, and the investment community is going to demand that you grow organically. They're going to demand that you grow organically. I just don't understand why this industry doesn't get this. You got to be able to grow organically. You can't just keep buying up, buying up, buying up. Ricoh couldn't even do that strategy with their core deliverable of print. Here's a list of all the stuff that Ricoh's bought. And folks, I pulled this one up because they neglected to throw this one on there. They probably didn't want to remind the whole world. But in 2014, Ricoh bought MindShift. Read the press release. And then go read the press releases of all these acquisitions they made. About how they're going to take these great synergies. They're going to go into the marketplace and sell all their print customers all these wonderful other things. And what happened with MindShift? They bought that in 2014, 9 years. It was like a year and a half ago they did a massive impairment charge against MindShift. What happened with this one, folks? This is in their own business. This was the print business. Ricoh, buy Icon for $1.6 billion. What happened to that? Well, they ended up giving it all back to the dealers, and they did a big impairment charge against that too. Ladies and gentlemen, I really believe that Ricoh is heading down a path to do another big impairment charge. If you just look at their history, if you look at their operating profit, quarter after quarter after quarter, this here goes back to 2019, and I wanted to show this chart here because I put this up here. Who believes that Ricoh will double operating profit over the next 3 years? They're forecasting to do 70 billion yen in operating profit for FY 2023. And by the year they get to FY 2025, they want to have 130 billion yen in operating profit. Who believes they're going to do this? They're going to more than double. Who believes it? I don't believe it. And folks, the bottom line is because they don't produce enough operating profit, when they have a really bad time with something, like who knows what's going on with geopolitics, could there be another virus, whatever happens, any little hiccup. We saw what happened to them in the year 2020 because they weren't consistent in their operating profit. They just fell through the floor. It was a terrible year for Ricoh. They started to come back a little bit, but at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you can see where their operating profit percentage is. And yeah, this last quarter they had a 6.5%, but they didn't end up that way at the end of the year, and they haven't been that way at the end of the year for a long time. And that's something that Ricoh really needs to take to heart. Because they're going to do another press release in 2025, and they're probably going to say, well, we didn't hit our forecast, but we grew 30% or 40% or 50% or 90%. We need to start hitting our forecast, not just with the revenue, but we need to hit our forecast with the operating profit. And what Ricoh consistently doesn't do is hit their forecast of their operating profit. Konica, for the most part, as well. They put this forecast for operating profit out there, and they just come up with a number, I believe it, and then they don't even hit it. And at the end of the day, if you're not forecasting accurately your operating profit, to me, you're not paying attention to it. And if you look at the results, you'd almost have to come to that conclusion. And Ricoh, they want to do all this other things. They want to become this digital services company. I get it. But I don't know how you brag about becoming this digital services company. You talk about the revenue you're going to produce, but you don't talk about the operating profit you're going to produce. And I would love to know how much of that 170 billion yen operating profit in the year 2025 is going to come out of digital services in each of those categories. If you can't tell us that number now, are you going to be able to tell us that number in 2025, in 2024, maybe at the end of 2023? Are you going to start taking it serious enough, because it is the future of your company, to actually manage the operating profit of the digital service portion of your company and share those results with the world? Ricoh, called you out on it, just like I did with Konica and the rest of them. You can't talk about all this other stuff you're going to do if you're not willing to share the numbers on how you're doing it. Just some things to think about, my friends, because we all know this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck.